The Kersey time slip, an incident defying all logic where time seemingly bent, pulling 3 young cadets into a dimension that should not exist. Are you ready to confront the inexplicable? In the military tales of demons, spirits or unnamed entities always lurk in the shadows. From skinwalkers prowling the desert to ghosts haunting the trenches, soldiers often recount encounters that make the blood run cold. But few stories are as strange as the Kersey incident, where 3 British Royal Navy cadets inadvertently stepped across the boundary of reality. I have read hundreds of reports, but this case, it makes me wonder whether time is truly a straight line or merely a tangled loop waiting to ensnare the unwary. That morning, October 4th, 1957. The crisp Suffolk air carried the scent of dry grass and early mist. 3 young Navy cadets, William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker, were walking across the expansive fields, maps in hand, eyes sparkling with youthful confidence. "That must be the village, right?" Lang Crowley spoke up, a touch of excitement in his voice as he spotted the church tower looming in the distance. "Yeah, the farmer mentioned the tower." "Good landmark," Lang replied, his voice firm. "Hurry up, my stomachs." Rumbling, Baker grumbled, making all 3 laugh. They had no idea that just a few steps further, all 3 would fall into an inexplicable nightmare. Time. A concept seemingly simple is the cruelest deceiver. It flows steadily like a marching soldier's steps, but sometimes it stops. Or worse, it reverses. Based on my research experience, these time slips often occur in places saturated with supernatural energy, lands that have witnessed tragedy or are cursed by ancient entities. Kersey, a small village in Suffolk, appears peaceful at first glance. But digging into its history, I discovered whispers of a curse from the Middle Ages, linked to a forbidden dark ritual. Could that be the reason time here became distorted? The cadets' mission was simple: practice map. Reading determined coordinates and observe the village of Kersey. They had been thoroughly trained, the maps in their hands, accurate to the smallest detail. The night before, they slept in an old barn where the smell of rotting wood and a chilling dampness seeped into every fiber of their clothing. "This barn gives me the creeps," Crowley whispered to Baker at midnight, his eyes scanning the dark corners. "Come on, it's just the draft." Baker brushed it off, but his voice couldn't hide his unease either. The next morning, as the sun rose, the 3 left the barn, unaware that Kersey was not just a destination but a temporal trap. As they neared the village, a strange sensation began to creep in. The air grew heavy, as if each step was pulled back by an invisible force. "Do you guys hear anything?" Baker suddenly stopped, straining his ears. "What?" "It's just the wind," Lang answered, but his voice wavered. Not a single bird chirped, no sound other than their own ragged breaths. None of them said it, but the exchanged glances revealed their shared anxiety. According to later reports, they described feeling watched by something unseen. To me, this is a typical sign of supernatural interference. Perhaps a spirit, or worse, something much older. The village of Kersey appeared before them, but it was unlike any village they had ever seen. No chimney smoke, no human sounds, only old stone houses standing silently under a gray sky. "This place, why is it so quiet?" Crowley mumbled, his hand tightening on his backpack strap. "Like a graveyard," Baker added, his voice trembling. They entered the village, but each step seemed to pull them deeper into a distorted reality. Empty dirt roads, dark window panes, and a chilling cold clung to them. I've studied slip points like this, places where space and time intersect, creating a rift leading to other dimensions. Kersey at that moment was no longer England in 1957. The strangest thing, according to their later accounts, was that the village seemed stuck in another era. The houses had ancient architecture, like from the 14th century, with thatched roofs and wattle and daub walls. There were no signs of electricity, vehicles, or anything modern. "Are we lost?" Lang asked, his voice starting to panic. "No, the map clearly points here," Crowley yelled, pointing at the crumpled paper. But when they tried to find a way out, every path led them back to the village center, as if space itself bent to keep them there. To me, this indicates a time loop phenomenon often recorded in places haunted by powerful supernatural entities. The most terrifying truth emerged when they encountered a figure. A woman in ragged robes, her face pale, stood motionless at the end of the street. "Hey, who are you?" Baker called out loudly, but there was no answer. As they approached, the figure vanished like mist. "Good God, where are we?" Crowley whispered, his hands trembling. They ran, but the village seemed alive, the walls whispering unintelligible sounds. I have seen similar descriptions in reports about skinwalkers or trapped spirits. Entities that manipulate space to ensnare their prey. Could Kersey be a gateway to a cursed dimension? Somehow, after hours of being trapped, they found a way out. Stepping out of the village, all three collapsed, gasping for breath, feeling as though they had just escaped a horrific nightmare. But what sends shivers down my spine is this detail when they turned to look back. The village of Kersey had changed. Modern houses, chimney smoke, and human sounds appeared as if they had just stepped out of a parallel reality. Where were we? "Lang?" Baker asked, his voice cracking. "I don't know, and I don't want to know." Lang replied, his eyes still fixed on the village. Their story was dismissed by the Navy, but I believe they accidentally stepped through a time rift, a phenomenon science cannot yet explain. Kersey's mist remains, waiting for the reckless to step through. As a researcher, I've seen many strange things, but this story makes me question. Are there entities manipulating time, waiting to pull us into their world? Or was Kersey just an accident, a crack in reality? Whatever it is, it reminds us that in this world there are mysteries reason can never touch. What would you do if you stood before that mist? Step through or turn back? Through the thin mist, the village of Kersey gradually emerged, hazy like a painting forgotten by time. The church tower rose high, proud amidst the fiery red autumn trees, and the bell tolled, deep and resonant like a summons from a distant world. William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker stopped, their eyes fixed on the horizon. "Listen, the morning service bell." Baker whispered, a faint smile of relief on his lips. But in my heart, as a researcher of supernatural phenomena, that bell struck an ominous chord, like a warning from an invisible entity, inviting the daring into its domain. They continued towards the village, their military boots crunching on the carpet of dry leaves. But as they reached the edge of the woods surrounding Kersey, a chilling sensation like an invisible hand tightening around their chests made all three halt. "Wait, where did the bell go?" Lang stopped abruptly, ears straining, his face pale. "I don't know, just stop." "Dead." "Weird?" Crowley replied, his voice faltering, eyes darting around the bell, which had just been ringing, now vanished as if it never existed, leaving not even an echo. I have read about similar phenomena in military reports when sound is muffled. It's often a sign of a time rift or interference from a supernatural entity. Silence descended, heavy as a curse. The air became thick, as if space itself was exhaling death. "What's going on?" Baker mumbled, unconsciously gripping his backpack strap. They walked down the small path leading into the village, secretly hoping to see the usual bustle of people heading towards the church, like any normal village on a Sunday morning. But Kersey was silent, devoid of people, devoid of sound. These dead zones, places trapped in a parallel dimension where life is drained away. Could Kersey be such a place, or worse, a gateway to a cursed reality? When they glanced back up the slope they had just descended, a horrifying truth froze the blood in their veins. "The church? Where's the church?" Crowley cried out, his voice cracking. The tower, the clear landmark they had seen from afar, had now vanished as if he raced from reality. "Impossible!" Lang yelled, eyes wide, scanning frantically as if trying to relocate the familiar silhouette. But there was nothing but bare trees and a gray sky. Lang insisted he had a 360-degree view. Impossible to miss such a large structure. From my experience, the disappearance of physical structures is often linked to spatial concealment, a tactic used by supernatural entities to trap their prey. Confused and panicked, the three cadets continued along the main street, but each step only pushed them deeper into the nightmare. The narrow dirt paths were muddy, showing no trace of asphalt or tire tracks. In 1957, even in the countryside, there should have been at least a few cars, but Kersey had none. Did we wander onto a medieval movie set? Baker tried to joke, but his voice trembled, his eyes darting around. The houses that appeared before them were small, dilapidated with rotting wooden frames and dingy thatched roofs. Some didn't even have windows, just gaping black holes like the eyes of a lurking entity. I've seen similar descriptions in documents about ghost villages, places abandoned by time where spirits or worse still linger. This place is just too weird. Crowley whispered, his voice trailing off as he stopped in front of a leaning house. Yeah, it gives me the creeps. It's not normal at all. Baker replied, his hand tightening on the hilt of the knife in his pocket. Suddenly, Lang pointed towards the shallow stream flowing through the village. Look at those ducks, they don't seem to be moving. Do they? All three stared intently. The ducks stood still as statues, their feathers gray, not a ripple around them. My God, are they dead? Crowley stepped back, his voice panicked. But no, they weren't dead. They were just motionless, as if trapped in a frozen moment of time. I have recorded this phenomenon in areas affected by strong supernatural energy where even life itself is manipulated. The emptiness of Kersey wasn't just silence, it was a deadly void, swallowing all sounds of life. No bird song, no insect hum, not a single breath besides the frantic pounding of the three boys' hearts. There's nobody here, nobody at all. Lang mumbled, his voice almost pleading. They ventured deeper into the village, but every street corner, every alley looked the same, empty, cold, and menacing. I have studied distorted spatial zones where supernatural entities, possibly demons or ancient spirits, create an illusion to imprison victims. Could Kersey be such a trap? Or had the three inadvertently stepped through a gate into another dimension? As they paused by the stream, an unexpected sound broke the silence. A whisper, faint but distinct, like a voice from another realm. Did you guys hear that? Baker asked, eyes wide. Quiet, Lang signaled, straining his ears. The whispering grew louder, unintelligible, but carrying a sense of desperation and anger. We have to get out of here now, Crowley yelled, but when they turned back, the path out of the village had disappeared, replaced by a thick wall of fog. To me, this is a clear sign of an entity manipulating space, perhaps a cursed soul or something older. More powerful, Kersey wasn't just a village, it was a prison of time. All sound seemed to have been swallowed since the church bell faded, leaving a deathly silence that suffocated the senses. William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker stood by the wooden bridge crossing the shallow stream, its water flowing sluggishly like blood in the veins of a body that had ceased breathing. They cupped handfuls of the icy water, hoping to dispel the panic, tightening their chests. Try to stay calm? We just need to do our observation task and get out of here, Lang said, his voice stiff, but his eyes were lost, as if searching for a reality that had vanished. These moments of bent time, places where space seems to breathe fear, and Kersey with its eerie silence embodied a supernatural nightmare. Unsure how to face the mounting strangeness, the three decided to stop by the bridge to carry out their assigned observation task. They stood there, ears straining, eyes scanning the landscape, but received only a chilling stillness in return. William Lang later described that moment with unforgettable haunting. It was a ghost village, there's no other way to describe it. As if we had stepped back into the past, into a place not meant for humans. The sky above them was a dazzling, almost surreal shade of blue, like it was painted by a hand. Not of this world. I've read about similar phenomena in reports on distorted time zones, where nature is manipulated by supernatural entities, turning everything into a skewed picture. But what stunned the three most were the trees. They were lush green, vibrant as if in mid-spring, a complete contrast to the golden autumn landscape they had just walked through outside the village. Look, why are the trees so green? Baker whispered, his voice cracking, pointing at the leaves shimmering like emeralds. We just walked through a whole field of red leaves. Crowley added, eyes wide with panic. Even more terrifying, not a single breeze stirred those leaves. They stood perfectly still, as if frozen in an eternal moment. This is a sign of a spatial curse, a phenomenon where time is distorted. making nature a tool of an unseen entity, possibly an ancient spirit or worse, something nameless. The stillness blanketing Kersey wasn't just eerie, it was a threat. "I feel like someone's watching me," Lang mumbled, his gaze sweeping over the dark houses. "Invisible eyes, they're everywhere." He paused, his voice trembling. "If we knocked on a door, who or what would answer?" Better not to think about it. The three stood there imprisoned by an unseen fear, daring not to move forward. "I have researched surveillance entities, spirits or supernatural creatures hiding in the shadows, observing victims to sow terror. Could Kersey be the domain of such a thing? A place where humans are mere trespassers?" The area near the stream had few houses, just a couple of dilapidated wooden cottages scattered along the dirt path, hidden among dense thickets. But just across the bridge, one building stood out amidst the desolation, a butcher shop with a peeling green-painted door. "Look, at least there's a sign of human presence," Baker said, trying to sound optimistic, but his voice faltered as the three approached. The shop's windows with small medieval-style panes were covered in dust and cobwebs. Peering through, they saw a sight that froze their blood. 3 skinned cow carcasses hanging limply, their flesh greenish and rotten, emitting a putrid stench even through the glass. "My God, what is this?" Crowley recoiled, covering his nose. "I suspect this wasn't mere abandonment. Perhaps a dark ritual had taken place, leaving behind traces of destruction." A cold sense of desolation pervaded, as if the shop owner had fled in panic, leaving everything to decay. They glanced through the windows of nearby houses, and the strangeness only intensified. Inside, not a single piece of furniture, no curtains, no sign of life. The walls were bare, coated with rough white plaster like unfinished tombs. "Look, the walls, they don't look like 1957. Construction." Lang whispered, his hand touching the rotting wooden doorframe. "More like centuries ago. I've seen similar descriptions in documents about cursed villages, places trapped in time where humans have been erased by a supernatural force." Stranger still was the complete absence of any gardens. In a rural area like Suffolk, every cottage would have a vegetable patch or flowers, but Kersey had none. If this place has been abandoned for so long, why is it still so intact? Crowley mumbled, his voice full of doubt. Not a single broken window pane, not a single collapsed roof. The village seemed preserved in a surreal state, like a museum of death. "To me, this signals a time shell, a phenomenon where a supernatural entity keeps a space from decaying, maintaining its trap." Were the 3 cadets being lured deeper into an inescapable maze? Standing in the ghost village, all 3 felt a profound sadness, as if Kersey itself was mourning its own fate. But mixed with the sadness was an invisible hostility, as if the village was alive, breathing, and did not want them there. "We have to leave," Baker said, his voice hoarse. "I don't care about the mission anymore. This place, it's wrong." But when they turned back, the path out of the village was shrouded in thick fog, like a living wall, blocking any escape. "I believe Kersey is not just a village, it is an entity, a time prison built by an ancient power. And the 3 young men were merely unwitting prey who had lost their way." The village of Kersey, though not entirely isolated, possessed a strange integrity, as if protected by an invisible force. Michael Crowley, with the sharp eyes of a Navy cadet, noticed not a single window was broken, no trace of the vandalism often seen from teenagers in rural areas. "This place, it's too perfect, like a frozen picture," he whispered, his voice trembling. "These static spatial zones, places stuck in a time loop, maintained by supernatural entities to prevent intrusion from the outside world." But Kersey wasn't just static. It radiated hostility, as if the village itself was lurking, waiting for the 3 young men to make a mistake. In 1957, even in the countryside, one would expect signs of the era: electricity poles, telephone wires, or at least a radio antenna. But in Kersey, there was nothing. No streetlights, not a single artificial light piercing the thick fog. "Look, not even a single wire!" Baker shouted, his voice cracking, pointing at the empty sky. The unease had now turned into raw terror, like a cold blade pressed against their throats. I have recorded similar instances in military reports where modern technology is erased in distorted spatial zones, as if an ancient entity is trying to keep its domain untainted by time. Let's go. Get out of here now. William Lang ordered, his voice urgent, eyes sharp but unable to hide the fear. The three practically ran, their military boots pounding on the dirt road, as if trying to shatter the eerie silence. They rushed past the dark houses, feeling the black window panes, watching their every step. I swear, something is watching us. Crowley gasped, glancing back but seeing only darkness. To me, this is a typical sign of a surveillance entity, a spirit or supernatural creature hidden in the space, manipulating the victims' minds to sow terror. Kersey wasn't just a village, it was a living trap. They climbed a small hill not far from the village, breathing heavily, sweat pouring despite the cold air. Reaching the top, all three froze, stunned, as if nailed to the spot. What the hell? Crowley stammered, eyes wide, pointing towards the horizon. The church tower, which had vanished when they entered the village, now stood tall and proud among the rooftops. The bell rang out again, clear and melodious, as if it had never stopped. The church, was it always there? Baker whispered, his voice trembling as if doubting his own mind. I believe they had just escaped a reality bubble, a parallel dimension where time and space were bent by a supernatural force. Not only the bell returned. Birds chirped merrily in the air. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying familiar sounds. Smoke began to rise from the chimneys of several houses, as if the village had suddenly come back to life. When we were in the village, none of the chimneys were smoking. Lang recounted later, his voice still haunted. Then suddenly, everything went back to normal. The three ran frantically down the hill, as if trying to shake off the clinging nightmare. From my research experience, this indicates a time gate closing, releasing them back into reality. But the haunting question remained, where had they been during those moments? Time, as I always emphasize, is a cruel trickster. The Cadet's story isn't necessarily time travel, but rather getting lost in another reality where time stopped, where birds and wind were silenced. Kersey at that moment seemed to be a reality bubble, a separate space created by a supernatural entity, possibly an ancient spirit or something darker. I have studied similar cases like the Moberly and Jourdain incident at Versailles, where they saw the palace as it was before the French Revolution, but Kersey had a darker undertone, as if the village itself was alive, hunting. This story became known to the public through the book Adventures in Time Encounters with the Past by Andrew Carr Mackenzie, published in 1997. Mackenzie was no ordinary man. He was a seasoned soldier, fought in World War II, reached the rank of captain, and was known for his guerrilla tactics. After the war, he became a journalist in London, but his fascination with paranormal phenomena led him to the Society for Psychical Research, SPR. I saw inexplicable things on the battlefield, he once told me in an interview. But Kersey, it defies all logic. As vice president of the SPR, Mackenzie investigated classic cases like the Cheltenham poltergeist and time slips phenomena, and the Kersey story haunted him until the end of his life. Mackenzie's fascination with the time slip phenomenon stemmed from the Moberly and Jourdain incident at Versailles in 1901. The two academics, principal and vice principal of St. Hugh's College, Oxford, claimed they stepped into another reality where the gardens of Versailles appeared, as they were in Marie Antoinette's time. They weren't mad, and they weren't lying. Mackenzie wrote in an article, they touched a time rift. To me, Kersey is similar but carries a darker shade, as if the village is cursed by a force unwilling to let go. This story isn't just a mystery. It's a warning that there are places in this world humans should not venture into. The Moberly and Jourdain time slip at Versailles, where they believe they met Queen Marie. Antoinette is one of the most haunting stories Andrew Mackenzie ever investigated. Both women remained adamant about their experience, describing in detail figures and scenes from the 18th century as if they had passed through an invisible portal. Later, historians confirmed that one figure they encountered bore a strange resemblance to Marie Antoinette. To me, this incident isn't just a story. It's evidence that time under the influence of supernatural entities can bend, pulling the unwitting into a reality not their own. Mackenzie, captivated by this phenomenon, spent his life searching for similar time rifts, and Kersey was a jewel in his research treasure trove. As a distinguished paranormal researcher, Andrew Mackenzie didn't just rely on theory. He frequently traveled to Romania, where folklore about demons, spirits, and parallel dimensions remains vibrant in every village. In Romania, people don't doubt the existence of unseen forces, he told me during a conversation. They live alongside them. Mackenzie's credibility in the psychic field came from his unbiased approach. He didn't try to prove a hypothesis, but let the truth reveal itself. His 30 unpublished case files archived at Cambridge University Library attest to this dedication. To me, Mackenzie was the one who opened the door for us to dare ask, is time truly a straight line or just a labyrinth created by supernatural entities? Back in 1957, after escaping the nightmare at Kersey, William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker submitted their report to the petty officers. But what they described a village without a church, technology, or life made their superiors frown with skepticism. "Are you sure you went to Kersey?" an officer asked, his voice full of doubt. Lang, with the resilience of a Scottish lad, asserted, "We were there, sir. But it wasn't the Kersey, you know." Their report was dismissed, attributed to youthful imagination. I've seen similar reactions in the military. Supernatural stories are often buried because they challenge reason and discipline. But with Kersey, the truth was too strange to be forgotten. Kersey was chosen as a training location for its simplicity and familiarity. But for Lang, Crowley, and Baker, three 15-year-old boys who had just joined the Royal Navy, the village was foreign territory. Lang came from Perthshire, the rugged Scottish Highlands. Crowley from Worcestershire, a peaceful rural county, and Baker was a true Cockney from London. They knew nothing about Suffolk, and that was the point of the exercise, to test the navigational skills of those completely unfamiliar with the terrain. "We only had a map and compass," Lang recounted later, "but the map couldn't prepare us for what was in Kersey." To me, their unfamiliarity with the area increases the story's credibility. They had no reason to invent such a ghostly village. The cadets' report, though, detail didn't match the Kersey the officers knew. They described dirt roads, medieval houses, and a deathly silence, things non-existent in the modern village of 1957. "Are you sure you didn't get lost?" an officer smirked. But Lang was firm. "We reached the correct coordinates, sir. It wasn't the right time." In the end, the officers just shrugged, dismissed them, and the story was buried for 30 years. I have studied similar cases where the military ignored supernatural phenomena to maintain order. But with Kersey, the truth managed to surface like a restless spirit. Years later, a phone call from Australia awakened forgotten memories. "Hello, Mikey. It's William, Will. Here, long time no see." Lang's voice came through, tinged with excitement. "Will's still doing well." Crowley replied, his voice warm. "Say, do you remember that weird village in Suffolk, Kersey?" A long pause followed. "Yeah, why bring that up?" Crowley asked, his voice suddenly low. Both men, now middle-aged, had emigrated to Australia, Lang in 1968. Crowley in the mid-80s, but the memory of Kersey remained sharp like a cut that never healed. I believe supernatural experiences like these never truly leave their victims. They hide, waiting for a moment to resurface. William Lang became haunted again after reading Andrew Mackenzie's Hauntings and Apparitions in 1982. In the book, Mackenzie invited readers to share paranormal experiences, and Lang felt as if the book was speaking directly to him. He wrote to Mackenzie in 1988, recounting the Kersey incident in detail. Before that, he called Crowley to confirm their memories. "I don't remember everything like you do," Crowley admitted, "but I remember the rotten butcher shop, the damned silence, and the lack of a single streetlight." Both agreed Kersey was not a normal village. It was a gateway to a place that shouldn't exist. To me, the consistency in their memories decades apart is evidence they experienced a genuine time slip. The story of Kersey isn't just a mystery, it's a reminder that time, however we try to measure it, remains a stranger. 3 young men accidentally stepping into a parallel reality brought back a tale that challenges all logic. I still dream about that village, Lang wrote in his letter to Mackenzie. The black window panes, like they're watching me. I don't know where we were, but I know we didn't belong there. To me, Kersey is proof that there are cracks in reality where supernatural entities, perhaps spirits, demons, or something, older, lie in wait. Do you dare step through the mist to find the truth? The memory of Kersey, though decades old, remained like a sharp, cold blade plunged deep into William Lang's mind. It wasn't just a strange experience. It was a haunting mystery, making him question if he truly belonged to this reality. In 1988, Lang, now a businessman in Australia, decided to write to Andrew Mackenzie, whom he knew through the book Hauntings and Apparitions. I can't stop thinking about that village, he wrote, his tone full of anguish. The black window panes, the deathly silence. It wasn't like any place on Earth. To me, letters like these are evidence that time-slip phenomena are not just illusions. They leave permanent psychological scars. Mackenzie, with the instinct of a seasoned psychical researcher, was immediately captivated by Lang's letter. He recognized this story wasn't a typical haunting, but potentially a case of retrocognition. The Society for Psychical Research SPR term for seeing the past. The Kersey they described wasn't the Kersey of 1957. Mackenzie noted in his research journal, it resembled a picture from the 14th or 15th century trapped in a time loop. I have studied similar cases like the Versailles incident, and what made Kersey stand out was the chilling detail in Lang's memory, from the rotten butcher shop to the motionless ducks. Had they inadvertently stepped through a rift leading to a Kersey from centuries ago? For 2 years, Lang and Mackenzie exchanged letters, each one a piece in the mysterious puzzle. With the help of a local historian, Mackenzie delved deep into Kersey's history, poring over old maps, parish records, and even interviewing the village's oldest residents. He discovered that Kersey originated around 990 AD, just before the Norman conquest. This village is steeped in history, Mackenzie told me during a meeting. But there are also whispers of an ancient curse, a forbidden dark ritual. Could that be why time here is distorted? To me, these details evoke the image of a supernatural entity, possibly a spirit or something darker, manipulating Kersey like a chessboard. Mackenzie didn't stop with Lang and Crowley. He tracked down Ray Baker, who was still living in London in 1990. But time had blurred Baker's memory. I remember the night before the trip, sleeping in that cold barn. Baker recounted, his voice thoughtful. And the small window panes, the empty houses, but it's all like a distant dream. Although Baker's memory was hazy, the consistency regarding details like the windows and the village's desolation reinforced Mackenzie's hypothesis. I believe that even if memory fades, supernatural experiences like Kersey remain deeply etched in the subconscious, like a warning from another realm. In 1990, William Lang flew from Australia back to England to confront the ghosts of his past. Alongside Mackenzie, he walked the streets of Kersey again, his heart pounding like it did when he was a 15-year-old cadet. That's the building. Lang pointed to an old stone house, his voice choked with emotion. The butcher shop, it's changed, but I can't mistake it. He paused, his gaze fixed on the peeling green door. Let me knock and see, Lang said, but his hand trembled as if fearing that what answered wouldn't be human. To me, this moment wasn't just a revisit. It was a confrontation with reality itself, where the line between past and present became fragile. What convinced Mackenzie absolutely of Lang's story were the discoveries made in Kersey in 1990. The building the cadets described as the butcher shop, with rotting carcasses and cobwebs, was known as Bridge House. In 1957, it was just a private residence, and in 1990 it remained so occupied by 2 tenants, Miss Gillian Finch and Ms. Gladys King. But the shocking revelation was this Bridge House had indeed been a butcher shop, but its last recorded use as such was in 1905, over half a century before the cadets set foot there. How could they have known? Mackenzie wondered aloud, his voice filled with astonishment. To me, this is the strongest physical evidence that they witnessed Kersey from a different era. possibly trapped in a supernatural loop. Mackenzie, with help from the Kane and Vince families, previous owners of Bridge House, traced the building's history. Public records were scarce, but accounts from both families confirmed Bridge House was a butcher shop from 1790 to 1905. Afterward, it was converted into a general store and sweet shop until 1970. Today, Bridge House is a holiday rental inviting curious tourists to experience the atmosphere of a bygone era, or perhaps to try their luck confronting the supernatural. The detail about the butcher shop is what chilled me to the bone, Mackenzie wrote in his journal. They couldn't have fabricated something they didn't know. To me, this proves Kersey is a time gate maintained by a force unwilling to be forgotten. The sincerity of Lang and Crowley combined with the historical findings convinced Mackenzie that the Kersey incident was a genuine time slip. They weren't seeking fame or money, he told me. They just wanted to understand what happened. But the biggest question remained unanswered. What pulled the three cadets into that reality? An ancient spirit, a curse from Norman times, or a more powerful supernatural entity manipulating time to trap its prey? To me, Kersey isn't just a village, it's a warning that in this world there are places where time disobeys rules, and those who step through the mist may never return the same. Although the Cockayne family couldn't provide official documentation on Bridge House's history, Andrew Mackenzie remained convinced by the building's unique structure. It's not just a house, he told me in an interview, his eyes alight with a researcher's excitement. Its architecture with the slaughterhouse in the outbuilding screams that it was once a butcher shop, perhaps even before 1790. Local historians confirmed the main building could date back to 1350, with rough stone walls and timber framing typical of the 14th century. Its location near the stream, ideal for washing away blood and waste from the slaughterhouse, further strengthened the hypothesis. To me, this detail isn't just a historical discovery, it's evidence that the three cadets touched a medieval Kersey trapped in a supernatural loop. But the truly chilling discovery was the disappearance of St. Mary's Church from the memories of Lang, Crowley, and Baker. The church with its proud tower is an unmissable landmark in Kersey, easily visible from the main street. Yet the three cadets insisted they didn't see it upon entering the village. Mackenzie, with meticulous research, delved into St. Mary's history and found that the tower's construction was interrupted by the Black Death, the horrific plague from 1348 to 1349. The church nave was only partially built, then easily obscured by trees, he wrote. To me, this is the key. The cadets might have witnessed Kersey right after the plague, when the village had virtually become a ghost town, devoid of people. The Black Death wiped out half of Kersey's population, which was only around 100 people at the time. The survivors in utter panic fled the village, leaving behind empty houses and deserted fields. Imagine the scene, Mackenzie said, his voice lowering. A village of death, no human sounds, no bird song, only the silence of the Grim Reaper. This explains why Lang and his companions saw no signs of life, from the motionless ducks to the bare houses. I have studied sites steeped in suffering like battlefields or plague zones, and they often act as magnets for supernatural phenomena. The Black Death, with its sheer horror, could have left a temporal scar on Kersey, pulling the three cadets into a cursed reality. Mackenzie concluded that the cadets had accidentally stepped into 14th century Kersey right after the plague had ravaged it. They didn't just see the past, he told me, they lived in it. Details like the butcher shop, the unfurnished houses, and the missing church tower perfectly matched a village just decimated by the Black Death. But what chills me is the idea that Kersey might be a supernatural hotspot, a place where the energy of death and suffering is strong enough to bend time. There are places where spirits don't leave. I once wrote in a report, they linger manipulating reality, and Kersey is one of them. Could an ancient entity born from the plague still be lurking in the village's mist? The story of Kersey challenges all logic, unsettling even the most skeptical minds. If I hadn't researched these documents myself, I wouldn't believe it either. Mackenzie admitted, no one, not even local historians, could offer a rational explanation for how 3 cadets described a 14th century Kersey with details like Bridge House and the missing church without any historical knowledge. To me, this isn't just a time slip, it's proof that there are rifts in reality where past and present intertwine, maintained by supernatural forces we don't yet understand. What would you think if you stood before such a village where time is no longer a straight line? Though centuries have passed, Kersey still retains its medieval charm with cobbled streets and ancient timber-framed houses. It has become a favorite location for filmmakers, hailed as one of England's prettiest villages. But behind its charming facade lies a dark mystery I feel. It's still watching me, Lang told Mackenzie as they walked through Kersey in 1990, as if the village knows we saw something we shouldn't have. To me, Kersey isn't just a place. It's a reminder that there are locations on Earth saturated with suffering and death that are still alive, breathing, and ready to pull anyone into their temporal loop. If you ever visit Kersey, stand by the stream, listen to the silence, and ask yourself, is that thin mist hiding another reality? 3 young men inadvertently crossing the boundary of time brought back a story that not only astounds us but forces us to question the nature of reality itself. They weren't lying, Mackenzie asserted in his final notes. They lived in a Kersey no one else could see. To me, this story is a warning. There are places where time shows no mercy, and those who dare to pass through may never return unchanged. Do you have the courage to face that mist? Some might argue that William Lang and Michael Crowley, coming from distant parts of the UK, could have simply been overwhelmed by Kersey's ancient appearance, mistaking its preserved medieval look for something strange and supernatural. But this argument crumbles when considering Ray Baker, a London native familiar with East Anglia. If Kersey was truly just a normal village in 1957, why did Baker also describe unpaved dirt roads, empty houses, and a deathly silence? That place wasn't like anywhere I'd ever seen, Baker told Mackenzie, his voice still haunted. To me, the consistency in the accounts of all 3 cadets, regardless of their origins, is evidence they encountered a different reality. A Kersey trapped in time, perhaps centuries earlier. What makes the Kersey case even more mysterious is the detail about the butcher shop. How could 3 cadets with no historical knowledge describe Bridge House as a decaying butcher shop, when in 1957 it was merely a private residence? We saw cow carcasses hanging greenish like they'd been left there long ago. Lang recounted, his eyes still wide with panic at the memory. Mackenzie discovered that Kersey's main road was paved shortly after World War II in the late 1940s, along with much of West Suffolk. Yet the cadets insisted they only saw narrow, muddy dirt tracks. That wasn't the Kersey of 1957. Mackenzie told me, his voice firm. They saw an older version, possibly from the time of the Black Death. To me, this detail is a dagger piercing through all skeptical theories. Mackenzie delved into Kersey's historical photo archives, searching for clues. He examined photos from the 1890s, when Bridge House was still a butcher shop showing livestock, wading through puddles in the road and a wooden bridge crossing the stream. Another photo from the 1930s or 1940s depicted a more modern Kersey, with more houses along the stream and signs of technology. But when Lang was shown these photos, he immediately shook his head. "No, that's not it," he said, his voice trembling. There weren't this many houses, and the church, it wasn't there. To the right of the road was dense forest, not houses. To me, this discrepancy isn't a weakness in the story. It's evidence that Lang and his companions saw a Kersey from before these photos were taken, possibly from the 14th century. In the 1950s, the Suffolk Preservation Society worked hard to maintain Kersey's medieval charm, ensuring the skyline wasn't ruined by power lines or antennas. But a photograph from before 1957 shows at least one telephone pole in the village, along with numerous houses along the stream, completely contradicting the cadets' account of a technology-free Kersey with sparse houses and surrounding forest. They couldn't have made these details up. Mackenzie asserted, no one, not even a local resident, could describe a village from 600 years ago with such accuracy. To me, this points towards a phenomenon of retrocognition, a glimpse into the past possibly triggered by a supernatural entity manipulating time in Kersey. Pinpointing the exact moment the 3 cadets slipped into is challenging, and St. Mary's Church historically began construction in the 14th century but was interrupted by the Black Death, 1348-1349, leaving the tower unfinished and easily obscured by trees. The empty house's lack of furniture and small medieval-style window panes they described also fit a post-plague village when the population fled in terror. But I believe Kersey isn't just a fixed point in time. It might be a supernatural zone, a place where layers of time overlap sustained by the energy of suffering and death from the Black Death. Could an ancient spirit or something darker still be holding Kersey in a state between life and death? The contradictions between the cadets' memories and historical evidence don't weaken the story. They add another layer of mystery. We stood by the stream, and there was nothing but dense forest on the right side. Lang recounted, his voice convincing. No houses, no church, just silence. But photos from the 1890s and 1930s show a busier scene with houses and a brick bridge. To me, this suggests they saw Kersey from the period immediately following the plague, when the village was nearly wiped out. The supernatural energy from that tragedy might have created a reality bubble, pulling the three young men into a parallel dimension where time stood still. Kersey, with its ancient beauty, remains a medieval gem attracting filmmakers and tourists. But behind the cobbled streets and the timber-framed houses lies an unsolved mystery. I still feel it. Lang told Mackenzie while standing by the stream in 1990, his eyes fixed on Bridge House, as if the village is whispering, wanting to pull me back. To me, Kersey isn't just a landmark. It's a gateway where past and present collide, guarded by a supernatural force that doesn't want to be disturbed. The cadet story is a warning. There are places on Earth steeped in suffering that are still alive, waiting for the reckless to step through the mist. Would you dare confront that mystery? What makes the Kersey story so haunting isn't just the KHP&I historical details, but the chillingly surreal nature of the accounts from William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker. They described a village not only devoid of people but lacking the varied breath of life. No rustling wind, no birdsong, and apart from a few statue-still ducks, not a single living creature appeared. It was like the whole world held its breath. Lang recounted, his voice trembling at the memory. To me, this unnatural silence cannot be explained by a simple time slip. Even the 14th century with its green fields surely had wind and birds. Could Kersey be a parallel dimension manipulated by a supernatural entity more powerful than time itself? That deathly stillness is the most puzzling piece, pushing the story beyond the bounds of time travel into the realm of something darker, more mystical. Skeptics might easily dismiss it as a fabrication, suggesting Lang and Crowley, perhaps even Baker, concocted a thrilling tale together. But the sincerity in Lang's eyes as he recounted, I still see those black window panes in my dreams, he said. And Andrew Mackenzie's meticulous research make it impossible for me, a paranormal researcher, to dismiss. There's something in Kersey, Mackenzie once told me, his voice low. It's not just the past, it's something alive to me. That silence could be the mark of an ancient entity draining life to sustain its temporal trap. As a researcher, I always maintain a degree of skepticism, even when faced with stories like Kersey. It's undeniable that supernatural tales often attract attention seekers, from content creators to individuals seeking notoriety. But Lang, Crowley, and Baker had no such motives. They sought no fame or fortune, only understanding of what happened. Mackenzie, with his reputation at the Society for Psychical Research, was not one to chase sensationalism either. I'm not here to tell ghost stories, he once said. I'm here to find the truth. To me, the Kersey story lies at the intersection of what we know and a vast void of the unexplained, where theories of parallel dimensions or alternate universes begin to creep in. What happened in Kersey? Were the three cadets unwitting intruders into another dimension where time and space fold, connecting 2 points not by distance but by invisible supernatural threads? Or were they reluctant? Time travelers pulled into a 14th century Kersey right after the devastation of the Black Death. I have studied theories about spatial folding points where reality bends, allowing people to step from one era to another. But Kersey seems more complex. The silence, the motionless ducks, and the feeling of being watched suggest a supernatural force, perhaps a spirit, or ancient entity manipulating the village like a chessboard. The Kersey story is not unique. Other time slips like the Moberly and Jourdain experience at Versailles, or strange occurrences on Bold Street in Liverpool show that this phenomenon, though rare, is not unprecedented. They are rifts in reality. Mackenzie wrote in an article, places where the boundaries between dimensions become fragile. But Kersey stands out for its darkness, as if the village isn't just a time slip point, but a trap set by a force unwilling to let go. To me, these cases are reminders that the world we inhabit doesn't always follow physical laws. There are places where time, space, and life are bent by entities we do not yet understand. Rural Suffolk, with its rolling hills and ancient beauty, has long been fertile ground for strange tales. The 14th century Black Death left psychic scars on Kersey, nearly wiping out the village World War II with German bombing raids targeting West Suffolk. Due to its proximity to London and coastal ports, also contributed to a land steeped in suffering. But Suffolk holds even older mysteries. The 12th century story of the two green-skinned children in the village of Woolpit, who spoke an unknown language and claimed to come from another place. They were not human, a resident recounted in ancient documents. To me, these stories suggest Suffolk is a supernatural hotspot, where dimensions intersect, and Kersey is its focal point. Standing by the Kersey stream today, you might feel a strange stillness, as if the village is holding its breath, waiting. I never want to go back. Lang told Mackenzie in 1990 his eyes still haunted, but I know it's still there waiting. To me, the Kersey story isn't just a mystery, it's a warning that there are places on Earth saturated with tragedy and death that are still alive, hunting. Would you dare step through the mist, confront what lies beyond? Or would you turn back, staying safe in familiar reality? The choice is yours, but remember, in Kersey, time is not your friend. The Suffolk landscape, with its rolling fields and ancient villages, has long been fertile ground for supernatural tales. Ghosts glide silently through timber-framed houses. Poltergeists shake church foundations, and disembodied whispers echo through graveyards and dense forests. There's something in the Suffolk air, a local once told me, their eyes filled with a haunted look, as if the land itself breathes, telling stories nobody wants to hear. These phenomena aren't just random, they suggest Suffolk is a supernatural hotspot, where the veil between dimensions thins, inviting entities from other realms to seep into our world. But it's not just ghosts and spirits. Suffolk has also been the stage for mysteries beyond Earth. In December 1980, the Rendlesham Forest incident shook the UFO research community. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, a highly decorated officer with service in WW2, Vietnam, and Korea, along with other witnesses, described an unidentified flying object UFO landing in the forest near RAF Woodbridge, a U.S. Air Force base in Suffolk. It wasn't an aircraft, not anything man-made. Halt stated firmly in his report, his voice convincing. It moved with precision, as if controlled by an intelligence far beyond ours. Radar at nearby Watton RAF base also detected an unknown object that mysteriously vanished near the forest. To me, the Rendlesham incident is proof that Suffolk isn't just haunted by spirits, it's also a destination for extraterrestrial forces. Lieutenant Colonel Halt's credibility, given his extensive military service, makes his testimony difficult to dismiss. I know what I saw, he said in an interview, and I wasn't the only one. UFO reports in Suffolk didn't stop with Rendlesham. In the following decades, locals continually reported strange lights in the sky, objects moving at physics-defying speeds and trajectories. That night, I saw something hovering over the field. A farmer told me, his voice trembling. It made no sound, but I felt like it was watching me. To me, these stories suggest Suffolk might be an interstellar gateway where extraterrestrial and supernatural entities intersect, drawn by the area's unique energy. From the 14th century Black Death to German bombing raids in WW, Suffolk is steeped in suffering and tragedy. These events, combined with ancient tales like the Green Children of Woolpit, mysterious beings speaking an unknown tongue, paint a complex supernatural picture. But the phenomena in Suffolk, whether ghosts, UFOs, or time slips like Kersey, seem to lack a clear connection beyond geographical proximity and a chilling level of high strangeness. They're like pieces of an unsolvable puzzle, Mackenzie once told me. To me, this suggests Suffolk is an intersection zone where different dimensions and timelines intertwine, creating rifts for entities not of this world. What can we deduce from these mysteries? Perhaps nothing, just stories to tell by the fire on cold winter nights. Or perhaps more profoundly, they are echoes from another reality, seeping into our world through invisible cracks. I don't know where we were, Lang once said, his voice haunted by the memory of Kersey. But I know it wasn't a place humans should go. To me, phenomena like Kersey, Rendlesham, or Woolpit aren't just mysteries, they are reminders that the universe is vaster than we can comprehend, and Suffolk, with its bloody history and supernatural energy, is a gateway to the unknown. If you live in or near Suffolk, perhaps you too have heard or even witnessed strange occurrences. A shadowy figure in the woods, an unexplained light in the sky, or a feeling of time suddenly stopping. Tell us your story, Mackenzie urged in his book, and I agree. Each account is a piece of the puzzle, helping us get closer to understanding the universe's mysteries. To me, Suffolk isn't just a region. It's an invitation, a challenge to confront what lies beyond our understanding. Do you have a story to share, or will you remain silent, fearing that speaking out might open a door you cannot close? Until science, or perhaps time itself, unveils these mysteries, we can only stand on the sidelines contemplating the echoes from other realities. Kersey, with its deathly silence and black window panes, is a warning that some places on Earth do not welcome humans. I still dream of that village, Lang said, his voice distant, and I know it's still waiting. This story isn't just a time slip. It's evidence that the world we live in is full of rifts where supernatural, extraterrestrial, or ancient entities lie in wait. Will you dare step through the mist to seek the truth, or turn back, staying safe in the familiar world? The answer is yours.